And after a week of big political disappointments, President Biden is scheduled to speak at any minute to tout the benefits of the infrastructure law that he signed 60 days ago, including billions of dollars to fix and replace thousands of bridges and charging stations for electric vehicles, among other major programs. Joining us now is NBC News senior White House correspondent Kelly O'Donnell, Reuters White House correspondent Jeff Mason, and former Republican National Committee Chairman Michael Steele. Kelly, the White House is clearly looking to tout some wins. It's been a rough week.
There have been some very big challenges for the president, and this will be a moment to be able to pause and talk about something that went as they had hoped it would and something that matters very much to the American public, and that is infrastructure. And this was bipartisan, and this will show us some of the ways that in real practical terms, money that was appropriated through the bipartisan infrastructure law will become reality in real projects to affect bridges around the country. We'll hear from the president. We'll hear from Mitch Landrieu, who people may have remembered as the former mayor of New Orleans, who has been tasked with helping the president to implement infrastructure. And this will be about making some of the rotting, decaying areas of concern. You know, remember that list of bridges that were on the top 10 of being a real threat to public safety. Some of the funding that will be directed in these ways. And so this is a chance for the president to tout a win with specific projects now and money being allocated, and a chance to try to see what could come. And it does come at a time when the president has had other political setbacks. This is where they want to talk about something that worked well and something where they can promise some future tangible results.
And Jeff Mason, I want to talk about Russia and foreign policy. You were in at that famous news conference with Donald Trump, and at the summit in Helsinki, of course, with Vladimir Putin. Right. And so you have studied this, you've seen it up close, but Russia now is saying that there was nothing accomplished, and there's certainly been no narrowing of positions between Russia and the U.S. after a week of diplomacy. And there really is a universal view that it has failed to prevent anything worse from happening. And now NBC is reporting that there are actually Russian operatives pre-positioning to create a false flag operation in eastern Ukraine to try to provoke a false pretext for an attack against Ukraine, saying that Ukraine was trying to attack Russia. This was hinted at, certainly, by Jake Sullivan when he said that there was new intelligence about exactly that at his briefing yesterday.
Yeah, it sure was, Andrea. And you cited that press conference. One thing I think we see in the jobs that we do is how history repeats itself. And certainly with President Putin in office, as long as he has been, the tensions between Russia and the United States have those incidents of repetitions are continuing. And that's definitely a big challenge for President Biden right now. The president and his staff, including Jake Sullivan, as you just referenced, have made very clear that there will be very tough economic sanctions, tougher than they've ever had before, if Russia does make the decision to invade Ukraine. But this definitely counts as one of the biggest challenges facing the White House right now. And they have been saying for weeks now that they don't know what decision the president of Russia will make. But certainly his latest moves, including the reporting that you just cited, suggests that he is certainly ready to invade Ukraine if that's the decision that he makes.
And on the political side, Michael Steele, you're a former Republican chairman. We were hearing now from the Republican National Committee that they have decided that they will demand that any Republican nominee any candidate for the nomination, agree not to participate in the debates that have been in place from the Presidential Debate Commission since 1987.
Yeah, look, there's always been this sort of haggling with the process of the debates, particularly going back to the debate of 2012 with Mitt Romney being fact-checked during the course of the debate by one of the reporters. And so that's always stuck in the craw. And, of course, Donald Trump is hypersensitive to the idea of debating because he doesn't like debating. He doesn't like to do the work that goes into debating. And so the RNC is now trying to, grease those skids a little bit more. Some of the recommendations that they've asked for are good recommendations, but this idea that you're going to threaten potential presidential nominee with what? Because this is not something the political parties are involved in. The commission doesn't work with them because it's an apolitical process. They work with the campaigns. So a little bit of this is sort of the drama to feed the Trump engine, to make him feel like the party's going to be there fighting for him should he decide to run, and make it as easy as possible for him to do it. Overall, I think it's a silly idea because the country's going to need a debate in 2024. I just don't see that not happening. And, you know, if the RNC thinks that that's just going to take place on Fox, they've got another thing coming. So the reality of it is this is a lot of dog and pony show noise right now that's going to lead to very little, because it's going to be the presidential nominee who ultimately decides when, how, and under what circumstances they debate. And very briefly, I referenced this earlier, but were you surprised by Lindsey Graham saying that Mitch McConnell has not been loyal enough to the former president to be the leader if they do regain the majority? Is this the same Lindsey Graham who wasn't loyal enough when he slammed, the president for what he did on January 6th? Look, you can't take anything that comes out of Lindsey's mouth seriously, because it's going to change depending on the mood and the wind. The fact of the matter is Mitch McConnell, of all the Republican leaders, has been the most unmovable by Donald Trump. And so Lindsey Graham nipping at his heels is not something McConnell's not only going to pay attention to, but take seriously. McConnell has control of that Senate. Lindsey knows it. That was more drama for, again, feeding Trump than moving Mitch McConnell. Well, thanks to all of you. This is a drama that is going to continue to unfold. Kelly is nodding. I know she's going to be out there on the 22 trail and 24, of course. And it's going to be fascinating. God bless you, Kelly. Yeah, indeed. Thanks again. Have a great weekend, you all.